The rain pounded mercilessly on the pavement, swallowing the city in a storm of chaos. Emma stumbled from the car, her breath sharp, her eyes wide in disbelief. She whispered, "It can't be true. Not her, not my sister." Her world spun as neon lights smeared across wet asphalt like cruel reminders of false promises. Ahead of her, shadows merged into a single devastating truth. And she froze when she saw them. The man she loved and the sister she trusted most, hands entwined as though mocking her pain. A scream rose in her throat, but only silence escaped. The betrayal was not only his, it was hers, cutting deeper than any blade. Childhood promises shattered in a single heartbeat. Emma's voice broke as she whispered, "Why?" The storm answered with silence, leaving her drowning in heartbreak. The apartment walls felt colder than the storm outside. Emma sat in silence, her body trembling as if the rain had followed her inside. She replayed her sister's laughter in her mind, cruel echoes that scraped her heart raw. She clenched her fists and whispered, "How could she do this?" Every childhood memory was poisoned, every secret turned venomous. Their promises were shattered glass, now cutting deep into her soul. The storm outside beat harder, a cruel soundtrack to her unraveling. The silence inside was unbearable, broken only by the uneven rhythm of her breathing. Emma paced the room like a trapped bird, each step echoing with questions she couldn't silence. She muttered, "Was I blind this whole time?" Her mind twisted through memories, searching for clues she should have seen. She pulled open a drawer, photos spilling out like fragments of a life that no longer existed. Her fingers trembled as she picked one up, a picture of her and her sister, laughing under summer sun. The laughter that once warmed her now mocked her, echoing with lies. Emma's chest tightened as the photo blurred behind her tears. The phone buzzed on the table, but Emma couldn't bear to answer. Each vibration felt like the world taunting her ignorance. She whispered, "Everyone knew but me." The thought clawed deeper than betrayal itself. She imagined whispers behind doors, her sister's false reassurances, her husband's deceitful touch. The storm outside roared, thunder rattling fragile walls. Emma leaned against the window, her forehead pressed to the glass, staring out into darkness that mirrored her heart. Time dragged cruelly, each minute carving deeper wounds. Emma curled on the couch, a blanket pulled tight around her, as though it could shield her from reality. She whispered, "I gave them everything, and they took it all." Her chest ached as every heartbeat echoed the memory of their joined hands. She shut her eyes, but only the image burned brighter, searing her with a pain she could not escape. Sleep refused her, and the night became endless torment. The morning light crept into Emma's apartment, though it offered no warmth. She sat at the edge of her bed, shoulders slumped, staring at the floor as if answers were carved into the wood. Her reflection in the mirror looked foreign, a stranger carved by grief. She whispered, "Who am I now?" Her voice cracked, swallowed by the silence around her. Her heart ached, not only from betrayal, but from the terrifying question of what remained of her life. Memories of sacrifices replayed like a cruel film. The nights she worked late, the times she put family first, the love she gave without hesitation. Now all of it felt stolen, replaced by an emptiness too heavy to bear. The sound of the kettle boiling pierced the silence, as Emma moved like a ghost through the kitchen. Her hands shook as she poured water into a cup, though she didn't drink. She whispered, "I gave them everything." The simple act of making tea felt absurd when her world had collapsed overnight. She thought of the family dinners she once hosted, of her sister sitting across the table smiling, hiding secrets under the warmth of laughter. The kitchen walls seemed to close in on her, every object a reminder of routines now drenched in betrayal. She sank into a chair, staring at the untouched cup, feeling her own life slipping out of her grasp. The photo frames on the living room shelf caught her eye, each one once a treasure, now a cruel reminder. Emma lifted a frame of her wedding day, her smile radiant, her husband's hand tight in hers. Her fingers trembled, and the glass fogged from her breath. She whispered, "Was it ever real?" The memory stung, knowing her sister stood beside her that day, A maid of honor hiding betrayal in plain sight. The images felt poisoned, memories transformed into daggers. She wanted to shatter the frame, but instead her grip faltered, and the photo slid back onto the shelf. She felt powerless, crushed by the weight of her past. Emma sat at her desk, an untouched journal lying open before her. She picked up a pen, her hand hovering above the page, but no words came. She whispered, "I don't know how to start." The silence was suffocating, broken only by the storm of thoughts swirling in her head. She wanted to write her pain, to give it shape, but each memory dragged her deeper into despair. She thought of confiding in her sister all those years, pouring her secrets into someone who would later weaponize her trust. The blank page mocked her, just as the betrayal mocked her life. She dropped the pen, tears staining the empty paper. The day dragged into night, but Emma remained by the window, watching raindrops trace endless paths down the glass. She whispered, "She was my sister, my blood." Her chest tightened as the word sister felt foreign, hollow. Betrayal by a lover was brutal, but betrayal by family left scars that no time could heal. She imagined her sister's voice, once filled with love, now echoing like poison. She felt torn between rage and longing, between wanting to erase her sister's existence and wishing desperately for the bond they once had. The rain blurred the city lights, and Emma pressed her palm to the glass as if reaching for something lost forever. Emma sat frozen at her desk, the phone still in her hand, after discovering a series of messages she should never have seen. Her husband's words were sweet, intimate, filled with promises that weren't meant for her. She scrolled further, her breath unsteady, each word slicing into her like a blade. The realization struck harder when she saw her sister's name again and again, hidden within affectionate lines. Emma whispered, she was part of it all. Her chest tightened as rage and grief collided, flooding her veins with poison. She dropped the phone onto the desk, the clatter echoing like a verdict. Her hands shook as she sifted through more evidence, photographs saved in secret, moments stolen behind her back. Every picture cut deeper, showing her sister's hand resting casually on his arm, their smiles practiced, rehearsed, intimate. Emma pressed a hand to her mouth, muffling a scream. The images confirmed what her soul already knew, but her heart had refused to accept. Betrayal was no longer a shadow, it was carved into pixels, undeniable, irreversible. She whispered, "They never even tried to hide it." The truth weighed on her chest, pressing her deeper into despair. Emma wandered into the bathroom, gripping the counter as her reflection stared back like an accusation. Her skin was pale, her eyes red, and she barely recognized herself. She whispered, "What's left of me?" Tears blurred her vision, distorting the image in the mirror. Every flaw seemed magnified, every weakness exposed. She thought of her sister's beauty, her effortless charm, and the envy she had never admitted. Now, that envy burned, twisting into a cruel reminder of what had been stolen. She slammed the water on, splashing her face, but the reflection remained unchanged, broken and betrayed. The storm outside had eased, but inside her chest, the storm raged stronger. Emma picked up her phone, thumb hovering over her sister's number. Her heart pounded as anger surged through her, the urge to confront overwhelming. Yet her finger froze, paralyzed by fear. If she called, the lies would unravel, the fragile threads of her world tearing completely. She whispered, "I can't hear her voice." She set the phone down with trembling hands. Cowardice or self-preservation, she didn't know. The silence screamed louder than any words. As night fell deeper, Emma's rage burned hotter. She paced the apartment, her hands clenched into fists, whispers escaping her lips like curses. The betrayal consumed every thought, every breath, every heartbeat. She slammed her fist against the wall, the sound sharp, echoing her fury. Her body shook, but the tears returned, betraying her anger with weakness. She whispered, "I hate them, but I still feel hollow without them." The contradiction tore at her soul, leaving her trapped between rage and grief, unable to escape either. Emma's phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't her husband. It was her mother, a voice she hadn't heard in years. She hesitated, her pulse racing, then answered with trembling hands. The words came sharp and heavy. "Emma, there are things I never told you about your sister." Her heart stopped. Betrayal was already unbearable, but the thought that her mother carried secrets only deepened the wound. Emma whispered, "What else could there be?" The silence that followed was filled with dread, as though the ground beneath her was giving way. Her family ties, once her anchor, now felt like chains tightening around her throat. Her mother's voice cracked as she revealed fragments of a truth Emma had never imagined. She spoke of favoritism, of jealousy that had lingered since childhood, of secrets whispered behind closed doors. Emma gripped the phone tighter, her nails digging into her palm. She whispered, "She always envied me, didn't she?" The confirmation came with silence, a silence heavier than words. The betrayal was not just an affair. It was a war rooted in family history, festering for years. Emma felt her chest collapse under the weight of decades of lies. Her sister hadn't stolen her husband by chance. It was calculated, born from envy nurtured since childhood. The revelation ripped through her, unraveling years of memories. Emma recalled every moment her sister stood by her side: graduation, wedding, celebrations. Were those smiles masks hiding resentment? She pressed the phone to her chest, gasping. It was never love, only envy. Her thoughts spiraled as betrayal gained new meaning. It wasn't just her husband's deceit, it was her sister's lifelong shadow pressing against her. Emma's hands shook as she tried to steady herself, but her body refused to obey. She sank into the mattress, her tears soaking the sheets, while the storm of truth consumed her whole. The call ended, leaving silence that screamed louder than her mother's words. Emma stumbled to the dresser, yanking open a drawer. She pulled out letters, journals, fragments of her past. Her sister's handwriting stared back at her from an old birthday card, cheerful on the surface, but now dripping with venom in her mind. She whispered, every word was a lie. Rage boiled as she tore the card in half, her body trembling with fury. The pieces scattered like shards of her shattered trust, covering the floor. She fell to her knees among them, lost in grief and rage. Emma pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, staring at the city lights bleeding through the rain. Her mother's words repeated in her head like a curse. Betrayal was deeper than she could have imagined, not only an affair but a lifelong rivalry. She whispered, "She wanted to destroy me all along." The truth left her shaking, but beneath the grief, a flicker of anger rose. For the first time, Emma's pain sharpened into clarity. The betrayal wasn't a wound to endure. It was a war she had been forced into. Her tears slowed, her gaze hardening with resolve. Emma's hand trembled as she gripped the doorknob of her sister's house. The night was silent, but inside her chest, a storm raged louder than any thunder. She whispered, "This ends tonight." Her heart pounded as the door opened, and there stood her sister, eyes widening in guilt. No words were needed. The air itself was poisoned with tension. Emma stepped inside, every memory of shared childhood flooding her mind, now twisted into betrayal. She whispered, "How could you do this to me?" Her voice was calm, but her rage burned hotter than fire. The silence shattered as her sister stammered, searching for excuses that carried no weight. Emma's eyes burned as she cut her off. "Don't lie. I saw everything." The words landed like stones. Her sister's lips trembled, but her eyes flashed with defiance, as if caught yet unrepentant. Emma's chest tightened, rage fighting with heartbreak. Years of trust, of shared secrets, of love, now crushed beneath the weight of betrayal. Her voice grew sharper. "You took everything from me." Her sister whispered back, "It was always mine to take." Her husband entered, his presence cutting the air like a blade. Emma turned, her eyes narrowing as the betrayal stood united before her. He reached out, but she pulled back. "Don't touch me." Her voice was steady, but her body shook. The sight of them together seared her soul, but she refused to crumble. "You betrayed me with her," she whispered, her words slicing through the silence. His face shifted with guilt, but no apology could heal the devastation. She felt the power shift, her voice steady, their lies unraveling in the open. Emma's fury finally erupted, her voice echoing through the room. "You broke me, both of you." Her sister flinched, but her husband stood silent, shame carved into his face. Emma's tears streamed freely, but her voice carried steel. "I gave you everything, and you gave me nothing but lies." The air grew thick, heavy with years of deception exposed in a single moment. Her body trembled, but her words were sharp, unrelenting, unstoppable. She felt both weak and powerful, broken yet unbowed. The confrontation was no longer about love lost, but about reclaiming her own shattered soul. The room fell silent after her words, the weight of truth pressing down like stone. Emma's breathing slowed, her chest heavy but steady. She looked at them one last time, her voice breaking but resolute. "You thought you could take everything from me, but you didn't know what I was capable of." The fire in her eyes replaced the tears, and she turned toward the door. Each step felt lighter, though her soul still ached. The betrayal had broken her, but the confrontation had given her strength. For the first time, she walked away not as a victim, but as someone who had faced her demons. Emma sat on her couch in silence, her body exhausted but her mind still restless. The confrontation replayed in her head like a broken record. She whispered, "It's over, but it still hurts." The apartment felt heavier, filled with echoes of memories that now carried poison. She closed her eyes and let her tears fall freely. But this time they weren't just tears of grief, they were tears of release. For the first time, she realized she had faced the truth head-on, and though the scars remained, she was no longer running from them. Her heart still ached, but it beat stronger with every breath. Morning sunlight crept through the blinds, soft and unfamiliar after the storm of the night before. Emma sat at the table with a steaming cup of tea, her hands steady for the first time in days. She whispered, "I survived." The words were fragile, but they carried weight. Though the betrayal still bled inside her, she felt a flicker of strength rising from the ashes. Every sip of tea tasted bittersweet, but it was hers, untouched by lies. She breathed deeply, grounding herself in the simple act of being alive. The world outside carried on, and so would she. Emma walked through the park later that day, her body moving slowly, as though relearning how to exist in the world. Families laughed, children played, and life went on as if her world hadn't just collapsed. She whispered, "Maybe one day I'll feel whole again." The breeze touched her skin gently, and for a fleeting moment she felt the weight lift. Betrayal had carved deep wounds, but the world around her reminded her that healing was possible. She inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with air that tasted of freedom, fragile yet real. Back at home, Emma opened her journal, the blank pages waiting once more. This time her hand did not hesitate. She wrote slowly, each word carrying fragments of her pain and pieces of her strength. She whispered, "This is my truth." The act of writing became an exorcism, pulling shadows from her heart and placing them on paper where they no longer had power over her. The scars remained, but she was learning to breathe around them. For the first time, she saw a path forward, fragile but her own. That evening, Emma stood by the window, watching the sun set in hues of orange and gold. The city stretched before her, alive and unbroken, even as she carried her wounds. She whispered, "I am still here." The words felt stronger than she expected, like a promise to herself. She knew betrayal would haunt her, but she also knew it would not define her forever. She placed her hand on the glass, her reflection staring back, not as the broken woman of yesterday, but as someone surviving, someone beginning again. Emma sat alone in the dim apartment, the quiet pressing against her like a second skin. The echoes of confrontation replayed in her mind, sharp and relentless. She whispered, "They took everything from me." Yet even in that silence, a strange calm began to settle. She realized she had survived the worst storm of her life. The scars would never fade, but survival itself was a form of defiance. She stared at the empty room, and wondered if loneliness was her punishment or her freedom. The silence answered with nothing but the sound of her own steady breathing. The phone on the table buzzed again, a single vibration cutting through the quiet. Emma glanced at the screen, her sister's name flashing like a wound she refused to reopen. Her chest tightened, but she didn't answer. She whispered, "You don't get to break me again." With one motion, she flipped the phone face down. The silence returned heavier, but it carried a strange relief, like shutting a door on a fire that had already burned her to ash. It was final, cold, but necessary. Emma walked to her dresser and pulled out a box of old photos. She leafed through them slowly, the images of her childhood with her sister, staring back at her like ghosts. She whispered, "Was any of it real?" Each smile, each hug, now twisted into lies. The weight of betrayal pressed harder, but she closed the box with finality. She knew she couldn't erase the past, but she could refuse to let it control her future. Her fingers lingered on the lid, trembling but firm. She stood at the window again, her reflection merging with the city lights. The skyline stretched endlessly, indifferent to her pain. She whispered, "I'm still here." Her voice cracked, but the words felt like a vow. She pressed her hand against the glass, and in her reflection, she saw both the broken woman and the survivor. Betrayal had stolen her happiness, but it had also uncovered a strength she never knew she had. For the first time, she did not cry. The night closed around her as Emma sat back down, phone still silent, her heart heavy but steady. She whispered, "I was never enough for them, but I am enough for me." Her eyes closed, and the silence wrapped her like a shroud. The betrayal had carved her soul open, leaving wounds that would never fully heal. But in that silence she found truth. She was alone, but she was alive. And that truth, brutal and haunting, would remain long after the night ended.